Hi, my name is Tom Corrigan, and together with Misha Marshak, we are going to be talking to you about the 1 hour long cycle and how to prepare to get ready for all the things you're going to encounter if you try to go 1 hour with a long cycle event without putting the kettlebell down. Now, what we recommend is if you're just a total beginner, kettlebells probably isn't the best event to try to start off with. But if you've been lifting kettlebells for 2 or 3 years, you've done 10-minute events before, you're very familiar with the technique of the long cycle, then definitely you have the makings to go an entire hour with the kettlebell. A couple of things is you got to make sure you can at least do a 30-40 minute workout with kettlebells. You're doing that 3-4 days a week, and you have the capacity and the work capacity to be able to do this. What's going to change is we're going to have you work on certain technique changes and certain techniques you'll have to come up with to make it for the entire hour. Now, you're going to be able to switch as much as you want, in a sense rest as much as you want, and you're going to use a lighter kettlebell than normal. So if you're used to competing with the 24, you'll probably be smart to use 2 sizes lower, in the sense the 16. For the women that are used to competing with the 16, you'll probably at least want to do the 12, maybe even the 8. Because again, 1 hour is a long time. Because the biggest thing you'll find with going long distance is not so much what happens to your upper body, but in a sense what happens to your lower body. Because you are going to be on your feet for an hour straight, you are going to learn and have to practice leaning from side to side, giving your feet a break. Which brings us around to learning how to rest. So the big thing you're going to have to learn is how to truly sink that arm in when you're in the rest position and the rack position, and be able to slow your heart rate down and take a few extra breaths. Now, there is a tendency when the kettlebell is a little bit lighter to tend to use your arms a little bit more. What's going to happen is you can get away with that with a 5 or a 10-minute set, but once you start going 30, 40, 50 minutes, a whole hour, just using your arms a little bit more could set you up for problems with your elbow. You could aggravate your elbows or your wrists for all that pulling with the arm. So what we suggest is that definitely you're going to have to use your calves a little bit more. You're going to have to come up on your toes, probably on the clean a little bit. And the other part of it is when you're lowering the kettlebell down, you might want to come up on your toes to slow that descent a little bit. In a regular competition, you do it to save your thighs because it's heavy. For this, you're doing it because your calves are a great endurance muscle. They have much more endurance than your thighs. So to add those calves into the exercise, both on the clean and the lowering of the jerk, definitely will help you in the long run. For this event, obviously, you will not work, and you can't work unless you've trained extensively for it, at a breakneck pace. You're going to have to learn how to do a nice moderate pace. Usually it's going to be anywhere in the realm of 8 to 10 repetitions a minute. Now, there's a number of different ways you'll probably want to split it up. You can either go an entire minute on one hand and then an entire minute on the next hand, switching back and forth like that. Or you can try going approximately 30 seconds on one side and 30 seconds or so on the other side. And then so every minute you'll be doing a small number of reps on each hand. The other route to go would be to kind of forget about the time and just focus on repetitions. You can go, we would probably recommend you probably focus on going 5 to 10 repetitions, probably 10 repetitions each hand, and then taking a few long breaths to pause and to switch hands safely. That way you don't feel in a rush, you don't feel like you're under the clock, but some people like that. You can either count up to 10 or down to 10. You'll find ways to kind of make it easy in your head. It gives you something to focus on, the numbers, and otherwise other people like to focus on the time, and then they'll just do as many reps as they can, whether it's 8 or 9, really doesn't matter. They just kind of go with how they feel. You'll have to experiment and see what in a sense, works for you. Now, within that minute, we suggest you probably give yourself about 10 seconds at the end of each minute, or maybe 10 to 15 seconds, to be able to transition, bring that kettlebell down, and then, in a sense, shift, move your hands, shake out your hands, wipe the sweat off you if you need to do that, maybe take a drink of water. There'll be people hopefully handing, if you're at a big event, handing out chalk, so you can put a little extra chalk in your hand. That extra 10 seconds does a couple things. It keeps your heart rate under control and allows you to do some of the things you'll need to do to make it the entire 1 hour. Now, one of the things that'll help you to use less energy is when you switch over, you're going to switch over in a sense with two hands. Now, that's not the way the normal sport competition for the women goes, or the men goes for the snatch, or the women, when you switch over hands, you do an extra swing. For this long event, that's just adding another swing. So, what you want to try to do is that when you come down with the clean, when I'm switching over to this hand, is dig that other hand behind the palm before you even start to clean it down. So I've dug it in, and now I'm going to drop it, bring it up, and adjust it if I have to. And then I'm ready to go with the long cycle. So when I go to switch, instead of going down, switching, and coming up for another event, I'm going to stick that hand in, clean it with two hands, and bring it back up. That again assures that you do not ever drop it when you're getting fatigued later in the set. And the other thing is, it gives you a chance to be loaded evenly. When I put the fingers in and I drop down and bring it up, for that swing down, I'm evenly loaded, instead of another load, uneven, and then you're bringing it back up here. It's better to stick that hand in, come down, bring it back up, and then make sure it's positioned correctly in your hand to start your next arm. You will have, in a sense, a regular training heart rate, a near maximal heart rate. For me personally, I've monitored this for a number of years, and I know I can go 170, 175, and that's near or near max heart rate. But what I find is when I keep my heart rate between 140 and 150, then I can maintain it for a long time. So you're going to have to, in a sense, find your cruising heart rate that you stay at and you can keep going and going and going. It becomes very important for these longer events. Now, I just use a simple monitor that goes around my chest, underneath my shirt, of course, and then I have the little watch, and I attach that to my belt so I can look down and check my heart rate from time to time. Now, you don't have to train with it all the time, but by glancing down and checking it and seeing how you feel, you can get a sense of where your heart rate's at, feel how tired you feel, and glance at the clock. And then you know, hey, I feel great, my heart rate's only 130, 140, hey, I'm okay. 150, now I'm starting to have to pant a little more, breathe harder. So what you want to do is experiment and find out what your cruising heart rate is, and then learn to look for those signs where you can stay at that heart rate. So you don't need a heart rate monitor, but you should be aware of your heart rate and be able to keep it lower, and to use breathing techniques where you can take longer, slower breaths and lower your heart rate so you can make it the entire hour. Obviously, for the regular kettlebell, biathlon, even the long cycle, the use of belts is, a lot of people use them. This would be a typical belt used during the jerk or even during the long cycle. The problem is, for a 1 hour event, number one, you don't need this amount of support for the amount of weight you're going to use. So a very stiff, hard, the regular kind of kettlebell sport lifting belt might become problematic for long periods of time. It would tend to shift and dig into you, and for an hour, these belts probably would be too much. The other alternative is a softer, they have softer kind of belts with Velcro and they might be more comfortable if you need that kind of support. A softer Velcro belt like this might be helpful. The other alternative could be one of the things I use, which is in a sense a kind of a work belt or a dress belt that is full leather. You want something a little thicker than a normal belt, not a dress belt, but a kind of a work belt, something that's strong enough that you can have down low, which will give you a little bit of support. Not so much for the strength and power, because you won't need it for that, but you'll need it for the endurance of your back. This is going to, in a sense, tax your low back. When you start to get into 30, 40, 50 minutes worth, you might start to feel it in the low back. Just a simple, smaller belt will give you that little bit of support in your low back that you can go these longer distances safer. Now again, you might not need it, but it's something you probably would want to experiment with and see whether it makes you lift a little better with just a small, strong leather belt. If you have knee or elbow issues, and sometimes you tend to wear the knee or elbow sleeves, one of the things you're going to find is that because of the long nature of this set, you will probably not be able to wear your tight knee sleeves or tight elbow sleeves, just because it will, in a sense, cut off the blood flow a little bit too much. Something you can handle for 10-minute set will probably not be something you will handle for a half hour or longer. So my suggestion is either find a little bit larger size. I use an older pair that's been definitely broken in, which fits my knee, keeps it warm, gives me a little support for the knee issues I've had in the past, but it's not too tight, something I can definitely wear. And you're going to have to experiment and go those longer sets and see how it works for you. Quick word on wrist wraps or kind of some wrist supports. Again, you're going a long time. You're going to have approximately a half hour of pressure of cleaning the bell on each hand and then jerking the bell on each hand and resting either in the rack or overhead. So you might need that protection on your wrist. You can double up, just plain socks, or you can keep it longer. And if you're not used to this kind of wrist support, you can have a longer one. This might be used in a sense for sweat control. You're going to be going for an hour again, so you might need to wipe off the sweat and to keep the sweat from running and keeping your hands nice and dry. So even if you normally don't use wrist wraps, for this long event you might want to experiment and see how they work for you, and start off with maybe a single long one like this, which is just a crew sock which has been cut off, or you can double it up for a little bit more protection if you're going a little bit heavier. But try it, see it. Once you start sweating that much, you might need it to make it through the entire hour. Now the same thing goes with sweat control for your head. You know, you are definitely going to be sweating during this event, and getting the salty sweat in your eyes could definitely make it an unpleasant event. So, you know, think about it. You might want to use a headband to control the sweat, or a bandana, or like I said, use this, your armband, to get the sweat, but definitely, or backwards baseball hat. Anything, there's a lot of options there, but you'll want to experiment with that and see which one you can tolerate the best, because you will definitely be sweating very heavily during this event, and getting into your eyes will definitely not be something you want to be dealing with. Now, of course, these are the regular kettlebell sport type shoes. They have a heel, usually hard material, either wood or some kind of composite. They're obviously perfect for the kettlebell lifting. You get that heel for the jerk, and it's nice and solid for pushing off. Now, the problem, in a sense, you're going to run into during this event is you are going to have to definitely wear them a lot looser. They usually have a Velcro attachment and laces. You're going to have to practice with them and not tie them as tight. Keep them loose. Make sure your feet can move around, and make the Velcro not as tight. When you start standing there for especially over 20 minutes, it starts to get into 40 minutes, A tight shoe is going to be very uncomfortable on your feet. So just be prepared ahead of time. Loosen up your weightlifting shoes. Make sure we'll show you some techniques you can use, shifting your feet around, taking the weight off, because your feet are going to definitely swell up for this long event as you're standing and pounding and doing the clean and jerk over and over again. You're going to need looser shoes. Another option, which normally would not work for heavier kettlebell lifting, is these are kind of a trail running shoe. So they got a little bit of a heel. They're kind of a running shoe like design, but they have a much tougher, harder heel with a lot less give. They're not the gushy running shoe. So this is another option. These are fairly cheap. You can get them at Big 5 or whatever, but that's another option. If you're only lifting a 16 kilo kettlebell, you don't necessarily need weightlifting shoes, but something flat is like a sneaker. A normal sneaker will not give you the kind of heel you need to do well with the jerk portion. So you can get a bit of a heel with these trail running shoes, but they're a lot tougher than the running shoes. Again, experiment. You are going to have to lace them a little looser so you can move your feet around and not have pain in your feet for the longer set.